Will Smith hits at Chris Rock as Rock spoke on stage. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Chris Rock reacts after Will Smith hit him. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Chris Rock reacts after Will Smith hit him on stage. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Ariana DeBose accepts the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for her role in West Side Story. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Jessica Chastain accepts the Oscar for Best Actress in The Eyes of Tammy Faye. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Philippe Rousselet, Fabrice Jean-Fermy and Patrick Wachsberger win the Oscar for Best Picture for Coda. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Will Smith accepts the Oscar for Best Actor in King Richard. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Troy Kotsur accepts the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for Coda. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Adassa, Stephanie Beatriz, Mauro Castillo, Carolina Gayton and Diane Guerrero, Becky G and Luis Fonsi performed the song, We Don't Talk About Bruno. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Hosts Regina Hall, Amy Schumer and Wanda Sykes begin the show. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Tiffany Haddish and Simu Liu present the Oscar for Best International Feature Film. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Francis Ford Coppola, C., Robert De Niro, R. and Al Pacino take the stage during a tribute to the Godfather movies. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Sebastian Yatra performs the song, Das Oruguitas from the animated film, Encanto. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Lady Gaga and Liza Minnelli present the Oscar for Best Picture. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Amy Schumer performs in a skit. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Uma Thurman, John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson present the award for Best Actor. Reuters. Brian Snyder. A photo of Betty White is displayed. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Best Supporting Actress winner Ariana DeBose poses with her Oscar in the photo room. Reuters. Mario Anzuoni. Jake Gyllenhaal and Zoe Kravitz announced Billie Eilish and Finneas O'Connell as winners of the Oscar for Best Original Song for No Time to Die from the James Bond film. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Cast members of the movie Coda celebrate after winning the Oscar for Best Picture. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Hosts Regina Hall, Amy Schumer and Wanda Sykes appear on stage at the end of the Oscars show. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Jessica Chastain congratulates Linda Dowd's Oscar for Best Makeup and Hairstyling for The Eyes of Tammy Faye. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Regina Hall speaks to the audience accompanied on stage by Simu Liu, Bradley Cooper, Tyler Perry and Timothée Chalamet. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Will Smith wins the Oscar for Best Actor in King Richard. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Beyoncé is shown on a large screen as she performs the song, Be Alive from King Richard. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Jared Bush, Byron Howard, Yvette Marino and Clark Spencer win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature Film for Encanto. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Kenneth Branagh accepts the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for Belfast. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Halle Bailey, Lily James, and Naomi Scott present the Oscar for the Best Animated Feature Film. Reuters. Brian Snyder. Regina Hall, Josh Brolin, and Jason Momoa on stage. Reuters Brian Snyder. Wesley Snipes, Rosie Perez and Woody Harrelson on stage. Reuters Brian Snyder. Shaun White, Kelly Slater, and Tony Hawk on stage. Reuters Brian Snyder. Jan Heder stands with a signer after winning the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay for Coda. Reuters Brian Snyder. Patrice Vermette and Jojana Sipos win the Oscar for Best Production Design for Dune. Reuters Brian Snyder. Director Ryusuke Hamaguchi accepts the Oscar for Best International Feature Film for Drive My Car. Reuters Brian Snyder. Billie Eilish leaves the photo room with her Oscar for Best Original Song for No Time to Die. Reuters Mario Anzuoni. Troy Kotsur signs as he accepts the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in Coda from presenter Yoo Young-yoon. Reuters Brian Snyder. Jennifer Garner, Elliot Page, and J.K. Simmons present the Best Original Screenplay Award. Reuters Brian Snyder. Presenter Kevin Costner on stage. Reuters Brian Snyder. Reba McEntire performs the song, Somehow You Do, from the film, 4 Good Days. Reuters Brian Snyder. A message is projected to show support for Ukraine. Reuters Brian Snyder. Jenny Beavan accepts the Oscar for Best Costume Design for Cruella. Reuters Brian Snyder. Rachel Zegler-Jacob Elordi present the Oscar for the Best Visuals. Reuters Brian Snyder. Ben Proudfoot wins the Oscar for Best Documentary Short Subject for The Queen of Basketball. Reuters Brian Snyder. Sebastian Yatra performs the song, Das Oruguitas, from the animated film Encanto. Reuters Brian Snyder. Nicole Kidman reacts before the start. Reuters Brian Snyder. Paul Lambert, Tristan Miles, Brian Connor and Jared Nefzer accept the Oscar for Best Visual Effects for Dune. Reuters Brian Snyder. Billie Eilish and Finneas O'Connell react after winning the Oscar for Best Original Song for No Time to Die from the James Bond film. Reuters Brian Snyder. Alberto Mielgo and Leo Sanchez win the Oscar for Best Animated Short Film for The Windshield Wiper. Reuters Brian Snyder. Jessica Chastain reacts to Oscar for Best Makeup and Hairstyling for The Eyes of Tammy Faye. Reuters Brian Snyder. Greig Fraser wins the Oscar for Best Cinematography for Dune. Reuters Brian Snyder. Host Regina Hall, Amy Schumer and Wanda Sykes. Reuters Brian Snyder.